As the world observed World Food Day yesterday, the Shoprite Group launched its food index, which tracks food security in South Africa. Now, it notes that by 2025, nearly half of South Africa's population will face food insecurity, with 48.96% of the population potentially not having enough to eat. Provincially, Limpopo will suffer the worst food insecurity, with 54% of the population not sure where their next meal will come from. Business anchor Rofhiwa Madzena spoke to Shoprite's head of Group Sustainability and CSI, Sanjeev Raghubir, and started by asking him about the index and why almost half of the South African population is at high risk.
The Shoprite Group undertook the study to get a better understanding of the extent of food insecurity in the country and where we need to focus our efforts. We felt that this was important to inform both our existing and future food security programs. We commissioned a study with the World Data Lab, and they used information from the United Nations World Food Program, starting off with a baseline of 2020 and then projecting what the food insecurity is likely to be in 2025. Whilst there's marginal improvement, it's still particularly concerning that the level of food security by 2025 will remain just below 50% of the country at 49%. We see that quite telling in some provinces like Limpopo and Mpumalanga, where the level of food security will be higher than 50%. The study also looked at the different types of areas and environments, rural versus urban. And quite surprisingly, the levels of food insecurity in some of our urban centers were significantly higher than rural areas.
That's very interesting. I suppose that does speak to the fact that food inflation does play a huge role here, where more and more South Africans are struggling to put a decent plate of food on the table. So perhaps just a little further breakdown, if you will, of that interesting fact around the urban populations suffering a little more in some instances when it comes to food security.
Yeah, indeed. I think part of the reasoning is that communities in rural settings are more likely to grow their own food. And in that case, they address some level of food insecurity. But we find, I mean, you are right with regards to food inflation, but other factors that contribute to food insecurity include unemployment, poor national or regional economic growth, limited access to resources, as well as not being able to realize the social grants. We know that the social grants play an important role and act as a barrier between many people and food insecurity. And for that reason, it's important that our social grants are administered and delivered in a very efficient and effective way. And for that reason, we felt that as the Shoprite Group, we needed to highlight and draw an emphasis and awareness around the importance of food security in the country.
Now, are there issues around climate-related risks that are going to have an impact of food security in the country, but also diseases like the avian flu, for example, that has now completely removed eggs, which is a huge, significant staple for many lower to middle income households in the country, as something that they can access at their local grocer. So disease and climate change are having an impact of the availability of food. Did the survey or the index look at those risks?
Indeed. So the index looks at a number of factors, including climate-related or health-related factors, and it incorporates that into the outcomes. But what's important is that we need to support the communities and help them to build a bit of resilience against this type of climate-related or health-related disasters. So as an example, the Shoprite Group supports more than 220 community-based food gardens and over 3,700 household food gardens. In that way, communities are able to grow their own food and have some level of resilience and be adaptive to a changing climate.
Now, apart from the work that a corporate like Shoprite would do in communities, just as you described, Sanjeev, are there other low-hanging fruits at a bigger scale that we can perhaps start to slow down the impact of food insecurity before we get to 2025, where we'll see nearly half of the population unable to access basic food?
Indeed. So what we see is that there's a need for a wider level of collaboration across the value chain, the food value chain, from agriculture to manufacturing to retailers, also government, civil society, and donor organizations. And the reason for this is that by leveraging on the strengths and of each of the stakeholders, we'll be able to address this in a much more coordinated, much more systematic way. So food gardens is one example, supporting community-based soup kitchens, ensuring that we manage the pricing of food and food inflation. For that reason, the Shoprite Group introduced already in 2016 a 5-rand loaf of bread. So you could walk into a Shoprite and buy a 600-gram loaf of bread for 5 rands, and you can do that even today. In 2017, the group further extended its 5-rand daily meals to include a number of other options. And Shoprite continues to innovate in that area. Recently, it released a 5-rand high-protein liver burger that's available at Shoprite Dailies. So these are ways that the group seeks to ensure that people who are vulnerable and are food insecure can at least buy some food in the stores with as little as 5 rands.